everyone, and welcome once again to The View from the Midwest. It's time for another St. Louis FC post-match edition, as St. Louis FC somewhat surprisingly took down the Colorado Springs Switchbacks by the score of 2-1. It was a pretty good game, a pretty good performance overall, and you have to give credit where credit is due. Something that I and several other people had been complaining about after the last few moments, or matches I should say, was the lack of creativity, the lack of changing things other than personnel on the field by the coaching staff. Well, they came up with a different game plan for this game. They went with a slightly more defensive lineup, but they also had two up front with both Ambersley and Herrera playing forward and going with more of a four-man midfield, kind of a 4-4-2 here and there. It was kind of an amorphous, fluid system. They weren't necessarily set up in a strict diamond, but that was pretty much kind of what they went with, and I thought it worked very well. They went with James Musa back in the central defensive role, and I don't think that Sam Fink was a problem with this team. He's been one of the few mainstays to have played fairly well in all games. But sometimes you just change things up and you see how things work, and it was probably more just kind of a giving Fink a rest kind of deal as opposed to anything that he had necessarily done, but it ultimately ended up working. I thought the back four ended up working very well. I was a little surprised to see Lurie playing on the wing back position as opposed to the central defender position. I thought he was the one taking Fink's position when I initially saw him in the lineup, but ultimately it ended up working, and you have to give credit where credit is due, as I mentioned, that there was enough of a change in the lineup. St. Louis FC came out, they showed that they were a little bit tired of performing the way that they had, and they managed to come out with 3 points, and you can't necessarily say too much against them. There were a few defensive miscues here and there, but overall I thought they played a very good team game, and that's what you need to play at this point. Irvin Herrera by himself is a fantastic player, but he can't do it by himself. You need good team play to support him, to fill in the gaps, to defend well. They got pretty good goalkeeping. Mark Pace made an excellent save in the second half off of a corner kick opportunity. St. Louis FC obviously would have liked to have not conceded the goal, because that gave Colorado Springs a little bit of an opportunity to kind of push the advantage, try to throw a little bit more on the offensive end and see what they could come up with. But St. Louis FC ultimately carried out the victory, and it was a good performance overall. A little bit lucky on the first goal perhaps, but those are the kind of things that you have happen with set-piece goals. Coming off the corner kick, it didn't necessarily look like they were going to get too much of it, but it came out to Musa. He managed to have a seeing eye shot that got through everybody and scored to give them a 1-0 lead. Then I haven't gone back and watched the replay. Watching it live, I didn't see this, but there were some people sitting around us that said that it looked like Irvin Herrera got away with a little bit of a push when he fielded the ball for his goal, and then he chipped it over the goalkeeper and into the net for the 2-0 lead. I'll have to go back and see that, because that'll be something interesting to see if he did get away with something. But quite frankly, the official was letting a lot go in that game, and it's the USL is kind of becoming not a joke. That's not the right word. It's being allowed to be a little too physical. I mean, you want to be allowed to have a certain physicality in the game. It is a physical game, but there's a little too much clutching and grabbing going on. This isn't the Premier League, and quite frankly, I wish they would get rid of it even there as well. You don't need to be grabbing shirts every single time you have an opportunity. You don't need to put an arm in somebody's neck every single time you get an opportunity just because the referee won't call it, especially when it comes in the box, because as an official myself, you don't necessarily want to be calling penalty kicks left and right. But there needs to be some way that people can figure out how to stop this kind of stuff without making the game itself a farce by having penalty kicks left and right. But that is for people that are, I don't want to say smarter than me, because I consider myself fairly intelligent, but have more time invested to be able to figure out such thing. So St. Louis FC, anyway, puts themselves back in the middle of the playoff race. Not that they were out of it by any stretch of the imagination, but they were starting to fall behind a little bit. With 3 points now, they vault themselves back up into that mixer to where they can, if they can kind of keep things going. You obviously want to be able to build on this and pull off a winning streak, if nothing else, or at the very least an unbeaten streak. But you know that the way the league is structured, the way the schedule is going to play out, that there are going to come losses within that schedule. Having said that, St. Louis FC is still in a decent enough position to where they can control their own fate with a lot of soccer yet to be played. I seem to be struggling, falling over my own tongue here. Getting back to the point, it was a good performance by a lot of people. No great individual performances. If I was to go on Twitter, which I'll probably do here in a moment, and vote for the man of the match, I would probably give it to Herrera just because, I mean, he's one of the best people on the team. You could also say Musa because not only did he score a goal, but he had a good defensive performance. You could give it to some of the good midfield play as well. But in this instance, when Herrera scores and he plays as well as he did, I think he deserves that kind of accolade. But the team itself is probably the man of the match overall because it was a great team game, and it was nice to see coming off of a really horrid start to July, finally getting their feet under them and maybe bouncing back for the rest of the summer. We'll kind of pump the brakes on that one and see how it plans out. What did you think of the match? Who was your man of the match? Let me know in the comments section. Comment, rate, and subscribe. Until the next time, though, I will see you then.